All right.
You tell me when you want to start. All right.
Okay, I think we'll start right now, and I'm just going to make a few brief opening remarks and then introduce you, and then we'll begin the lecture. So once again, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening, time out of your week to join us. My name is Zach Benjamin. I'm CEO of Jewish Long Beach and the Alpert JCC of Long Beach and West Orange County. It's a pleasure to welcome you tonight to the first installment of Understanding Anti-Semitism, which is a three-part lecture series. We're so fortunate to have with us tonight Dr. Edgar Moran, who teaches on a wide variety of topics, including anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. As I was preparing tonight for this program, I was reflecting on the fact that when we have the opportunity to hear from a Holocaust survivor, whether it's their story or their perspectives or their insights, we really have an obligation not only to hear and listen to those insights, but to pass them on to our posterity. It's really an imperative. So again, in that spirit, tonight we'll be recording these proceedings, as we will in each of these lectures, so that they can be available from generation to generation, and so many more than just those who are in this Zoom presentation tonight will benefit from it. Dr. Moran is a 41-year member of the Alpert JCC. He's also a longtime supporter of Jewish Long Beach, and before it, the Jewish Federation of Greater Long Beach and West Orange County. Usually when I'm given a biography or biographical information, I'm introducing a speaker, I have to pick and choose which sections I'll read and which I'll omit for time's sake, and maybe for the first time ever, I'm actually going to read the entire biography that I was provided, because there is not one word of it that isn't, I think, important and critical to Dr. Moran's story. So Dr. Edgar Moran was born in Romania in 1928. He's a Holocaust survivor, and he's lived through 4 Romanian dictatorships. As an idealist, he fought in the underground resistance during World War II. After the war, he was very active in the Zionist youth organization, which caused him significant difficulties under the Soviet-dictated communist regime. He studied and practiced medicine, and after 6.5 years of perseverance, he got his permit to leave Romania for Israel. He served as a doctor in the Israeli Navy, and then he studied anatomic pathology at the Hebrew University Medical Center in Jerusalem. He took his training in internal medicine at Columbia University in New York, in hematology at Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York, and specialized in medical oncology at the University of Chicago, where he taught until 1976, when he came to California and established the first medical oncology service at the City of Hope Research Center in Duarte. I'm going to pause so that I can let the next group of people into the waiting room. Continuing with the biography, as a professor of medicine at the University of California, Irvine, Dr. Moran dedicated his professional life to the cancer care of United States veterans, to cancer research, and to teaching medical students and young doctors. He has 2 adult sons, Daniel and Andre, and he lives with his wife, Huguette, in Long Beach, California, where he lectures at Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Cal State Long Beach since 2015. It's now my honor to turn the floor over to our lecturer, Dr. Edgar Moran.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you. It's an honor indeed to lecture at Albert's Jewish Community Center. And I'm happy that late in life, I come to the idea to offer these lectures. You already heard I am a Holocaust survivor. What you did not hear is that I am an Israeli. I have dual citizenship, Israeli and American. And I will start by telling you the usual thing of disclaimer and credits, which is nothing unusual. I'd like to tell you the story of how I come to lecture on the anti-Semitism. 2 years ago, 75 years after the Holocaust in World War II, I was lecturing on the Holocaust. In fact, next door at Cal State Long Beach. The audience was, I think, mostly non-Jewish. And at the end of the lecture, they came to the lectern and said, would you lecture us on anti-Semitism? And I said, anti-Semitism? All this hatred? How can I lecture on that? I suffered, but I cannot lecture. Libraries have been written. And then some of you may know the words of Hillel, the great philosopher. If not me, then who? And if not now, then when? It dawned on me that from all these years of having experienced anti-Semitism on my own, like the community, I probably know something about, to talk about. And I made this course in the way I see the plague of anti-Semitism. Pardon me. And I think we must understand first how humans have been, are, and probably will be forever, in order to understand how we function. How do we think? What prompts us to action? And how much morality do we really have? And it dawned on us, thinking of these things, that we are in fact a recordless society. We live for 2 million years as our ancestors, the Homo erectus, the first hominoid, Homo erectus, 2 million years. And we know about 10,000 years, 8,000 years since the agriculture. The Homo sapiens, after we killed the Homo neanderthal, we are, according to molecular biology, we are around for about 200,000 years. What do we know about it? Nothing. Modern humans, nothing. So I tried myself to put together this slide, and I call it presumed characteristics. I believe that you will all agree that what I have here is correct. And most likely I omitted, no, I did not omit, I forgot some. I think we agree that we are really geniuses, all of us, with all these characteristics. You also have to talk about us and the other people, Homo sapiens versus Homo sapiens. Well, I said we are helpful to the tribe mates, but definitely we ignore the needs of the neighbors. A point important. We are probably envious, greedy. I think we are violent. Are we violent in self-defense? Have we been scared? Most likely. We were violent because we were scared
Oh, good.
of other Homo sapiens that we do not know. We evolved in reinventing self
Shit.
to master fantastic conditions of life. The ancient foragers were most knowledgeable and most skillful people in history. Physically limber, energetic, self-reliant. But how do we deal with other men?
Yeah.
Well, if these are the characteristics or part of them, of Homo sapiens, when I was 13 years old, we started learning Latin. And the teacher told us an old Latin proverb, Homo hominis lupus est, which means simply, man is a wolf to another man. Terrible. But we learn it in a class, 13-year-old. But then it took about 1800 years for Sigmund Freud to write all these beautiful sentences in many words, saying what the Latin said, there in the last words, instinctual endowment is a powerful share of aggressiveness.
I made a big mistake on the blanket. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I lost track of the.
Zach?
Yeah, everybody, please make sure that you're on mute. In fact, I'm going to go through and I'm going to mute everybody so that we can enjoy
Mute.
the
Yeah.
lecture uninterrupted.
Thank you. I will answer questions from the chat box, and we'll have also a 10 minutes intermission. So with this, let's go on. We passed enormous catastrophes. And it's interesting, in this, we help each other. Last one, COVID. More than 6 million deaths in the world. Wars, however, showed us our other facets. We kill each other. These are only the second millennium, you see the deaths resulting from wars. 85 million in World War II. And with this, I must share with you few very important principles, personal thoughts related to the perception of people and events. We will agree that our understanding of life events is based on our previous experiences, education, culture, on who we are, in fact, which is normal. Sometimes we understand correctly, sometimes we don't. That's not good. We may favor some things, we hate some, even without reason. But remember, if we talk about history and life, world events must be perceived objectively. Very, very difficult. Perception of world events is different because we are different and not always correct. It is crucial to realize and criticize how we think. Doctrine and bias are threats to tolerance. And there are basic rules of life. All is changing in life. There is always a cause and an effect. And action and reaction rule the world. So, needless to say, we always have to ask why something happens. And if we can ask that, we understand its effect. And if we don't like the effect, we should change the cause. That is true in life today or 2,000 years ago. It will be always true and always effective. So what do we need for today at least? Objectivity. Learn only from facts. We need a global view of history and current events. To understand the present, we must understand the past, and we must search for the truth, only the truth. Bias can tilt the scales of justice. It has been said for hundreds of years. Now, about our sessions. I said I will give an intermission of 10 minutes. I'll be a slide that will announce the intermission. But I will discuss everything in an objective way with images and written text by me. I will avoid any bias much as possible. I see myself as a secular, dispassionate reporter to you today. I will not refer to religion or political preferences of the attendants. I should see ourselves as we are, or as we think we are. The plan is very simple. It will be an introduction. I will talk about the term and its definition. The diaspora, from diaspora to the emancipation, antisemitism in modern times, of course, the Holocaust and aftermath. The term of antisemitism and anti-Semite. Let's make it very clear. Semite or Semitic refers to a group of spoken languages, not ethnography. Spoken languages: Arabic, Ethiopian, Assyrian, and Hebrew. Now, anti-Semitism does not apply to Arabs, Ethiopian, Assyrian, as applies to Jews. But many Jews do not speak Hebrew. Therefore, anti-Semitism is not anti-Semitism. The word is, in fact, anti-Jewish, anti-Judaic, specifically for Jews, whether or not they speak Hebrew. Anti-Semitism also is incorrect usage with a hyphenated line, because it's not anti-Semites, it's anti-Jews. Simple like that. Where does it come from? Well, in the 1870, a Prussian historian, von Treitschke, very well known, said the Jews are our misfortune, and then wrote much anti-Semitic writings. And people made the word. But 10 years later, the German journalist Wilhelm Marr wrote a book, Der Sieg des Judentum über das Germantum, which means simply the victory of the Jewish spirit over the German spirit. Never thought before. The danger of infiltrating the Jewish spirit into the German spirit. No comments. This is the book, Wilhelm Marr, 1880. First time that he introduced in the book, in the text, the term anti-Semitism. The evolution, for some reason, picked up. A few years later, a Zionist, Leon Pinsker, very well known, published Auto-Emancipation, very important book for Jews who want to know the history of Judaism. And he said he prefers the term Judeophobia for the reasons that I just mentioned. We probably think on the same line. Zionists in particular did not like the term, to use the term anti-Semitism, because it is incorrect. But he talked about an inherited irrational fear of hatred or hatred of Jews. And then the one that used it very abundantly was, of course, Joseph Goebbels, German propaganda minister under Hitler, who said the German people is anti-Semitic. It has a desire to have its rights restricted or to provoke, blah, blah, blah. The rest will see that. And he started. So let's define the term of anti-Semitism without a hyphen. In Stockholm, there was a meeting in 1972, and the conclusion was that humanity is still scared by anti-Semitism and xenophobia. The international community shares a solemn responsibility to fight these evils. And the Committee of Anti-Semitism and Holocaust Denial was established, and the International Holocaust Remembrance plenary session took place in Budapest in 2015, and they adopted a working definition of anti-Semitism. And they have another meeting 1 year later in Bucharest, 2016, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. The definition of anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. This is a correct definition. And there's another one if you want, which is below. I cannot read everything because I read it for you. I wrote it for you so you can read it by yourself. How does it show? It charges Jews with conspiring to harm humanity, or the things belong to humanity. So to blame the Jews for why things go wrong. You are familiar with that. It is expressed in speech, in writing, visual forms and action, and all kinds of sinister stereotypes and negative character traits. In the last 70 years, it targets also the state of Israel when it has been discovered by some ignorant people that it's a state of the Jews. But the contemporary use of anti-Semitism is to justify the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or as an extremist view of religion. It uses mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, stereotypical allegations about Jews. As such are the power of the Jews, the myth about the world Jewish conspiracy, like the book of Mr. Marr. As an example, claims of Jews killing Jesus. That gave the idea, you will see that in the second lecture, on the blood libel or the host desecration. Horrible ideas that we feel offended for the human mind to see that human minds invented such terms to characterize Israel or Israelis or Jews in general, or applying double standard of requiring the Jews a behavior that is not expected from any other democratic nation. More recently, related to denying the Holocaust, that I found not only hurting, but offending to the human intellect. Denying the fact, scope, or mechanism like gas chambers, like mass killings, intentionally of the intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people in the hands of the Nazi, which is called the Holocaust. And there are Holocaust deniers, as you very well know. We're accusing the Jews as a people for inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust, or using the Holocaust for proper benefits, which is horrible. accusing Jews of being more loyal to Israel or to other alleged priorities of Jewish world war, claiming the existence of State of Israel as a racist endeavor. This is anti-Semitism related to the State of Israel, etc., etc. It comes to me then the mental process of anti-Semitism, after all these libraries have been written, after I hesitated for 5 months to do or not to do this course, in fact, it comes, like many complicated things, to something very simple. That disbelief in Jews' achievements of any sort causes envy and jealousy. Remember, homo hominis lupus est. We are not necessarily nice to each other. It comes only from our upbringing, from our education, that we acquire the philosophy of tolerance. The result is hatred. And hatred wants control over Jews, even killing. And then I remember, also in school, we learn a lot from Goethe, who said that hatred is something very peculiar. You will always find it strongest and most violent where there is the lowest degree of culture. Oh, I said, therefore what I said before is correct. Goethe, a great philosopher, said it before me. Well, I found also that G.B. Shaw said hatred is the coward's vengeance caused by his fear. Let's remember this. So we can start with this to the first lecture. Types of anti-Semitism. Well, there are, if you read about that or if you're interested, there's not only one sort of anti-Semitism. There's religious, social, definitely economic, cultural, racial, ideological, political, national. And I define them for you here. I also gave all this lecture to the office of the Albert Jewish Community Center so that you have access to that. And I understand the Jewish Community Center will also record the lecture. Religious anti-Semitism. What is that? Is the aversion to or discrimination against Jews as a whole based on religious beliefs, false claims against Judaism, or religious anti-Semitic canons. It's also called theological anti-Semitism. We are not to deal about that. How does it start? Well, I must tell you, in respect to people who will not spell the name of God fully, I use this form as you see it in this table with a hyphen. I'm a secular Jew, as I said from the very beginning, but I respect that some people will not like to see the name written in full. Now, let's see how I see the whole thing. I think that the Jews were a pastoral people without a religious identity. There was a shepherd called Abram in Ur, a small town in Assyria, which is Iraq of today. And we learn that he had revelation or revelations, hearing God speaking to him. And he learned that God is omnipotent. He learned that God is every place. He learned that God does not have a physical appearance and it is not seen. he learned that God conducts our lives, and he told his tribe that he ordered him, Abram, and his people to settle into a place called Canaan and promised to help them become a great nation. They were called Jews. They were not called Jews. The word Jew is a derivative of Jude or Judea. The word was Israeli. There were no Israelis before. With this comes a terrible thing, a formidable thing. Monotheism, believing in one God. It emerged in a world populated by many deities called polytheism, definitely antagonistic to Abraham followers. This is Abraham's journey about 2000 BCE, 4,000 years ago. Question mark. This is Assyria, Tigris, Euphrates, Urfa or Ur. He started from here and he took his time to went down to Canaan. And this is the history that we'll all learn, and painters painted because this is what they knew to do. Abram, a shepherd from Ur, heard God's voice, heard being commanded to follow God's order to go and to settle in Canaan. And even more so, God changed his name from Abram to Abraham, which in Old Hebrew means father of many. And he said to Abraham that his people will be as many as the stars in the sky. You see, these ideas that we learn from the Bible have been painted. Jews will never paint because they did not paint. That particularly, they will not paint an image of God. And the reaction of the Middle East people was formidable. Why have you been chosen as God's people? Remember, Homo hominis. What sort of gods have you? A God that is not seen? Unbelievable. And there were skirmishes and battles on these or another topics, never mind, but the Jews, the Israelis were not always the victors. So they said, you see, your God does not help you in battle. Battles of monotheism versus polytheism. These were, in fact, the real strongest battles. And it is like this for humankind. Okay, with God's covenant with Abraham, the Jewish nation, the Israelis, have been created. But with that, anti-Semitism also ensued. It's at that time. And yes, the Israelis had prophets, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as everybody knows. And then also the same source, the Bible, typically for the Bible, has another little passage that shows us what cause when it's disfavor that may induce antagonism. It's not only between the polytheists and the monotheists of the Israeli, but even within the Israeli, when Jacob displayed favoritism among his wives and children, what happened? Tension happened because of jealousy. Humans are humans. Homo hominis lupus est. And when depicted in the Bible a formidable idea of selling the Joseph by his brothers into slavery, this is a horrible thing for the same reason, jealousy. Okay, centuries later, about 7 centuries, give or take, 13th century BCE, you know the Jews were the Israelis, I should change that, became enslaved in Egypt. Moses, a prince of the court, for reasons that you know, beat an Egyptian, scared, ran away, and heard God. This is what we learn from the Bible. He then commanded to lead, the God told him, commanded him to lead his people out of Egypt to freedom. So he did. Miracle in Sinai. Moses were given the 10 commandments. I wonder, did the Jews, the Israeli, accept and apply them? No answer. They entered Canaan, many battles. Contemporaries say, why are the Jews God's people? There's still the same reaction, because these are intrinsic to being humans. This is what we are, essentially. When we are getting education and some philosophy and some bringing and some religion, we might be nicer to each other. But without that, we may be terrible. More religious antisemitism ensued. Good thing. The Passover Seder table was a nice thing to leave us. But centuries later, Jews were in their land. We are now around the year 1000. There were two kingdoms in Israel, in the land, Israel and Yehuda, and Saul, David, and Solomon, the 3 great kings, unified Israel and Yehuda. And Solomon built a temple, the first temple. Historians agree around 1000 BCE. The Ark of the Covenant with the 10 Commandments was located in the Sanctum Kodesh HaKadoshim, Holy of the Holy. But people don't realize that the Temple of Solomon meant to the Israeli. It symbolized the unification of the countries and the unity of the Jewish people, Israel and Yehuda. Read the Bible. These two people also fought each other now and then. But now they were one people. No, correction. Now they were one nation. They had their creeds, their religion, their land, their language. And the temple was the most spiritual, more powerful spiritual center of the nation. And the quiet period followed, a long period. That was the land at that time. These are the tribes, the kingdom of Israel and Yehuda united in 926 BCE. So it is the time of the Temple of Solomon. But I'll give you a timeline from time to understand what I'm going to talk. I will tell you now the bad times, exile in the Babylonia, the building of the temple, the Greek Empire, the Maccabees, not in much detail, don't be scared. But then another period or past would be the Roman Empire, Jesus Christ, the evangelists, proto-Christians, and persecution of the Jews. Did not start at that time, continued. So what happened is that Assyrians learn about the Temple of Solomon. And about 300 years later, they invaded Israel. Not more happened. But a descendant of this king, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, invaded in the 597 and 587, twice, invaded the state of Yehuda and destroyed the Temple of Solomon. he knew that by destroying the temple, he destroys the nation. And the Talmud writes about that. 20,000 Jews, apparently, they say about 25% of the population at that time was forced into exile into the Babylon. Well, terrible, but not so terrible. They wrote the Talmud of Babylon, the legal textbook of Judaism. Well, no comments. It was a tough time. Until 539, 532, when a good king of Iran, of Persia, King Cyrus I of Persia, liberated the Jews, and he helped them rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, providing resources and everything. So we have now the time of the Second Temple and the strong religious feeling of the Jewish people. And again, a very good 500 years and more time lapse. We come to the time of Persians defeated by Alexander Macedon, 331 BCE. The great Alexander died about 8 years later, and Greeks took over. They could not master the empire, so they divided the empire of Macedon. And we have the Hellenistic Empire between 323 to 146 BCE, when they were destroyed by the Romans. So now what happens? They were not nice. Hellenization of Judea occurred. Many religious persecutions. Rich Jews have been influenced by the Greek culture. Other Jews revolted. That caused the Jewish migration to Alexandria. Very important for some people, because the compilation of the Septuagint, the first Greek translation of the Holy Bible, was made in Alexandria by these Jews. But then the Greek xenophobia and the Jewish refusal to accept Greek religions and social standards caused the first pogrom of Jews. There's the first one. And this evidence of Greek influence on the Israeli life, if you go to the Beit She'arim necropolis at the foot of Mount Carmel near Haifa, there are vestiges of Hellenization. All these are not sarcophages of Jews. They were Jews, all right, because there are writings who they were. They were rich Jews that were Hellenized to make a face on a sarcophagus, to make figures of anything not Jewish. And then Seleucid King Antiochus Epiphanes profaned the temple. Bad idea. The prophet Daniel called this event the abomination of desolation. But there was also a revolt of the Hasmonean family, the famous Maccabees. And that is the feast of Hanukkah that you know. Jews were sovereign in their land. People wanted a theocracy. They liked that. And then I'll give you an intermission for 10 minutes. I'll look at the chat box.
Est-ce que c'est 2 heures ta leçon?
Doesn't look like there are any questions yet in the chat box, but please feel free to ask any and all questions in the chat box, and Dr. Moran will be happy to.
Well, on the chat box, we have something to do with the mute, and yeah, we took care of that. Thank you very much. If I know that everybody is in the place of the computer, I can take questions if you want. Any question? Zach, I think you have to unmute people to allow questions.
People, everyone, you do have the ability to unmute yourself. So if you want to ask a question, just simply unmute and go ahead and ask.
Well, I don't know who wants to ask a question. I will unmute it. I cannot.
Edgar,
Yes, I'm here.
this is Dr. Bryna Kane. I'm thoroughly enjoying your lecture. Kol hakavod, you are amazing. Oh my gosh. What a timely topic. And how did you come to research this project?
Well, I said in the one of the first.
No, I know in the beginning you said about that you went to Cal State Long Beach and you gave, but the timeline that you're using, how
Well,
did you do
see,
that? Come up with that?
I don't know your experience. I definitely know that I suffered considerably as a Jew, and I was only 10-year-old when, or younger. I was 8-year-old when I learned that I am a Jew, not on the last word. The word was Žid. Žid is so fancy. It's like,
Right.
you
Mhm.
know, hike.
Right.
And I have to go to Palestine. And a stone was thrown to my head, and I came home bleeding profusely. And I asked questions. I was a kid that was asking questions all the time. I still ask questions. And my parents were good enough to explain to me, particularly my father, explained to me exactly, well, for a guy that is 8-year-old, what is a Jew and why we suffer. And I felt horrible. Although it was not such a major event, I was not cut, I was hurt, but I was hurt in my soul. You will understand that. There's hurting and hurting. But all my life since then, I thought, why is there anti-Semitism? Why is there anti-Semitism? Not because so-called killing Jesus. I will come to that. Is going back to what I learned when I was 13. Homo hominis lupus est. We are not a very nice genre. Listen, while there is war in Ukraine, do I have to talk about this?
Yeah. Yeah.
May I say that I said enough?
Yeah.
I said enough.
Well, kol hakavod, and keep going and passing the word. It's very painful that as Jews today in 2022, we are still, anti-Semitism is alive and well.
Allow me to give also the second and third lecture. You will not like it, but we don't always like the truth, but you will feel invigorated. I'm sure you will.
I have a question. Dr. Moran, this is an outstanding program. Very informative, very well put together, very thorough. Thank you. For Zach or for you, Dr. Moran, how do we get a copy of this material?
Well, I told you all the slides are on a file that I gave to Dana Schneider. She can give to all the registrants.
Dana
addition-
has them. Okay, I know Dana.
But you don't have the audio. I don't know if you're interested in what I said, but
Randy,
Zach,
Randy, this is Zach. We'll be happy to send the link to this recording to anyone certainly who takes the class, and we'll probably make it available open source somehow, either on our website or on our YouTube channel.
so this is very generous, and I encourage you to take the audio visual from the Jewish Community Center and distribute it, copy it, give it, everything is free. And I gave many lectures in my life, also non-medical topics. This and the Holocaust, I feel most precious for me. And allow me to continue. All right. Roman conquest of Judea. Well, in 68 BCE, Romans captured Jerusalem. This is what they were doing, I say for a living. They were conquering nations. At the beginning, they did not know what this Jews gibberish was and what they want, and there's only one God, and they had many gods, but they tolerated the Jews' religious practice. They did not care about it. Then about some years later, 50 years later, there was an unrest for some stuff that was not religious. And the Herodian king, who was Jewish, was deposed, and the Roman governor, what they call prefect, was appointed. Well, that the Jews did not like, because taxes were imposed, anything new, and they were resisted by the Jewish zealots. I will talk about them. You would like to hear that. So they started a resistance to the Roman cult of gods, because they were coming with the statues of the gods all over the place. So that started the Jewish-Roman wars, a dramatic effect on the Jewish people, and what was said, a disaster of the Jewish society. And disaster it was. This was the Judea province at that time. This Jordan, the Dead Sea, the Tiberia, Judea, Idumea was called Samaria, is this area of the West Bank, was called Samaria. Northern of that is the Galilee, and this was Phoenicia, which was Lebanon today, and this is Syria today, and this is Jordan, Nabatea. Nabatean were a big people and their culture, Nabateans. But the Jewish society, people don't know enough about that. Let me give you a little bit. There were 4 sects of rabbis and thinkers. They were called Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Zealots. The Zealots were not so much thinkers, but doers. There were 3 very different philosophies and attitudes, difficult to reconcile under the Roman occupation, because it requires an open dialogue, and there were persecutions. So let's review a little bit the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because Pharisees got a bad name from the Gospels, and you better know objectively, as I said from the very beginning, objectively, the truth. Pharisees were the rabbi school of thought. Nothing wrong about that. They were scholars and educators. They followed the written Tanakh. You know what Tanakh is, the Bible. It's an abbreviation in Hebrew of Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the 3 books that make the Tanakh. Okay, the Bible. And the oral traditions, they accepted the oral traditions. They were religious extremists, somehow reminiscent of the Orthodox, very Orthodox, extreme Orthodox Jews today. Some people say, I don't know. They follow the halakha. That's beautiful. That is the Jewish law based on the biblical and the Talmudic law that make the Judaism. But they had these people as people, not as the concept. As the people, they thought better than though attitude. That is the reason I use italics. This irritating attitude that, look at that, were at odds with the Levites, who were Jews, very good class of Jews, of the Kohanim, of the priests. They had difficulties with Israel. When I say Israel is the people, I already mentioned that. They had all confrontation with Sadducees. I bolded because I want you to realize that we're not on a good contest for attitudes. They were also confrontational to Jesus. They had this better than though attitude. They believed in Messiah and in afterlife, which is okay. And they had the basis of the Hasidic Judaism, scholars today say. Period. Sadducees, totally different. They were the descendants of the high priest Zadok of the Solomon Temple. No, I talk about 1,000 years. They said so. They had the aristocratic status. They were wealthy. Is that because of wealth they were aristocratic? I don't know. I said only what is described. They had political power and religious clout. They accepted only the written law of Moses. They kind of reminded me last night about the Fifth Avenue, New York Jews versus the Lower East Side, Manhattan. Perhaps. They rejected the oral law. They were in charge of the maintenance of the temple, collected taxes, administered the state. They had official relations with the Romans, not subservient, very dignified. No afterlife, no Messiah. Well, you see the differences. There were no battles. They were talking, arguing. Essenes. Essenes were a Jewish sect that appeared on the firmament about 200 BCE and lasted around till about 100 CE, or the destructions of Judea. Humble, voluntary poverty, communal life, celibacy, abstinence from pleasures, devoted to charity and benevolence, studious. Many say that Jesus possibly adopted their teachings. Possibly. I ask, probably? I don't know. Zealots were not a philosophical concept, but in a way, yes. The word comes from the Greek. In Greek, zealot means fanatic. In Hebrew, it doesn't need fanatic. It's zealous on behalf of God. So it may be fanatic on behalf of God if you want. And they were dagger carriers. Sicarii was called, because the dagger was called Sicarius. Objected to Roman rule and fighting the Romans. These were the doers. These were the thinkers. And there were also scribes. I mentioned it because they were an elite class of wealthy families, well educated in languages and mathematics, wrote, copied documents, holy scrolls. Thanks to them, we know what we know today. And this is what they had, the Essenes lived. Here is the Dead Sea Scrolls in these mountains near the Dead Sea. Perhaps some saw this Qumran cave number 4, where 90% of the scrolls were found in 1947, 46, 47, and again in 1956. I remember as I arrived in Israel, it was the talk of the town. Extra biblical manuscripts, diversity of religious thought, not the Bible, not the prayers, religious thought, written between the 3rd century BCE and 1st century CE. I use CE. And these were the caves This is a view from the cave outside. This is the Dead Sea. This is a piece of desert. And they live here. There are big caves. That you have to visit that to see where there's Crete. There was a community there. They lived there. They thought there. The SNs were living there. Now, we come to hot stuff. Judaism at the time of Jesus and the Judeo-Roman conflicts. Look at that. Romans taxed and imposed allegiance to Rome and its gods, allegiance to Rome, and its gods created tensions. The Jews did not like them, did not adopt them like the Greek did. There were many skirmishes and unprecedented acts of sabotage, and the zealots were very active. Judaism. Judaism was a different phenomenon, and Jesus' teachings were a new movement within Judaism. But this happens all the time. All the great philosophers of the world were, in a way, doing the same thing within their own nation. Now, basic beliefs of the Jews. Belief in God, in one God. Belief in the covenant of God made with the people, Israel. Belief in the law of God, the Torah, the foundational book of the covenant. God is the eternal teacher of Israel. The people, Israel, were commanded to be obedient to God. And the basic rule in Judaism, I say this for those who don't know it, the word Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God. Very important. Comes now Jesus of Nazareth, born in Nazareth in Galilee, son of Miriam. Her name was Miriam, this Hebrew name. Mary was the Latin name, and Joseph, a carpenter. And he grew up as a God-fearing Jew. No question about that. What else? He spoke Aramaic, the language of the people. The old Hebrew is Aramaic. And spoke also Hebrew, which was spoken by rabbis and educated people. So he was learned. Israel loved Jesus' inspired teachings and parables, because people always love that, an inspired teacher. Most Pharisees, rabbis did not understand him. Some did. Some did. There are writings for that. Remember, Jesus never asserted that he was a king or the Messiah, never claimed divinity, but he spoke a figurative spiritual Hebrew. Having learned and being fluent in the Hebrew language, I became so convinced that the way he spoke was a figurative spiritual Hebrew. Beautiful, beautiful Hebrew. But Romans feared him as a revolutionary and as a leader, which in fact he was. He was not knowing. He was welcomed to the temple. It was said he performed many miracles, but he preached and taught Jewish traditions and philosophy. The most famous words that I like to quote here for you are love thy neighbor as thyself. In Hebrew, ve'ahavta re'ehu kamocha. This re'ehu is the Latin is alter ego. You see, we don't have a good word in English. The other, not necessarily a person, the other, the other humanity, re'ehu. I was just thinking that in doing this lecture that I think that was at the root of the Jewish concept that came much later during the emancipation. We'll talk about in the second lecture about the Tikkun Olam, making the world a better place, correcting the world. He was, to me, he was a philosopher. For these times, he was a philosopher and a great humanist. But he was not well understood by his contemporaries and feared by the Romans. That he was not understood or was not well understood by his contemporaries, that doesn't surprise any one of us. It was too much. And he was feared by the Romans for sure, particularly because he attracted the masses. Politically most dangerous, no question. So he was allegedly judged by the Sanhedrin under the pressure of the Romans. You judge, you Jew. The Supreme Court of the land, that land was the Sanhedrin. And there was no sentence because Jews never killed another Jew. A thing that was omitted later on. Anti-Semites omitted that completely. So he was sent to Caiaphas. And violating the Sabbath law by healing on the Sabbath, this was a commandment in the Torah. Threatening to destroy the temple was false, sorcery was false. Jesus used a figurative language, I said, not well understood. Caiaphas said that Jesus committed blasphemy that was totally invented. And the trial of Jesus by Caiaphas, well, finally we have a document. Josephus Flavius, the Jewish Roman historian of the first century, wrote, Jesus was quiet, did not mount a defense, and rarely responded to the accusations. He was condemned for various unsubstantiated accusations. And the painting, Chris, before everybody, all the painters of the Renaissance, of course, this was Giotto. They had to paint this, or they don't even know what happened there. And then he was sent by the Romans to Pontius Pilate, the governor. And he said, I find no basis for a charge against him. And allegedly wash his hands. Wash his hands. What does it mean? Wash his hands. Another painting. But Jesus left 12 apostles, Jewish guys, young people. Peter, Simon, Andrew, his brother, John, James, you know that. The number of apostles, by the way, varies in the Gospels. I studied that. In the Gospel of Luke, there are 70 apostles. There's not very much known. Is that important? You will see where I'll come from. I want to give the picture that is so difficult for all the reasons that I said in the introduction. Thousands of years of humans, and we don't have a history. Jesus sent his apostles to heal and teach. Sure, he said so. And there were 4 gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke are synoptic. They have a point of view. John's is different. And you know the painting, Leonardo da Vinci, whether it was Passover or not, this is superb. In the Roman Empire, Jews and Christians require a very short review, another review. It was the most confusing, critical time for all. There's no question about that. The Jews had a religion about 2,000 years old, from the time of Abraham. The Jews loved the religion, were devoted to it, and no ways, that was the ways of life. The Romans wanted to dominate. That was their job. Tax and impose their way, gods and whatever. Even their gods, they did not care so much, but they wanted quiet. I remind you other empires. They were not observant of other people. They were not tolerant. And now are a new group that I did not discuss previous. I said, I talk about the Romans and the Jews, but now it's also the Christians who were Jews, who had a new look on life and fervently believed in Jesus' teachings and the Messiah. Absolutely. So the temple is destroyed because there were Jewish revolts in Judea, nothing to do with Jesus. Emperor Vespasian sent his son, Titus. But he knew something, they all knew. That was the spiritual force of Judaism. That's the way to destroy the nation. The Roman soldiers showed utmost cruelty and hatred, complete destruction and looting of the temple. Jews sold in slavery, rape, several hundred thousands of Jews taken to Rome and paraded in triumph as captive prisoners. You know this on the Arch of Titus in Rome with the menorah, very victorious. But there was a place they did not get to. Masada, mountain horse-shaped west of Dead Sea. Herod the Great built a palace at the north end. And there were again the Sicari, the group of zealots, reinforced the plateau for resistance to Romans. These were the arm of the Jewish people, Israel. Roman legions encircled and laid a 2 to 3 months siege. Fantastic. They built an assault ramp on the west side. And finally, they breached the wall and found that all 960 defenders committed mass suicide. Now, you know, in modern Israel, Moshe Dayan, who was once a commander-in-chief of the Israeli army, introduced Israel Defense Force officers' oath, which we took on the Masada. And the oath is, Masada will never fall again. This is few words which should be known by everybody. This is the Masada. An aerial view from the north. This is the sea here. The Romans came from this side. Imagine that the Jewish people, apparently there are about 500,000 Jews. No, sorry, 4 million. 500,000 were taken to Rome. The rest were migrating. We'll talk about this. And this is the empire, and the little people of 4 million are opposed to their power. Incredible. This was between 44 BCE and 117 CE. So increased Roman taxation, and particularly when the Jerusalem called by Romans Aelia Capitolina, that infuriated the Jews, and they started a revolt with the leader of Simon Bar Kokhba, surnamed Bar Kokhba, son of a star. The revolt of 132 CE spread, 45 places in Betar, guerrilla warfare, very serious. Emperor Hadrian called 6 legions, 1/3 of the Roman army, 1/3 of the Roman army to quiet it down. And 550,000 Jews killed, several hundred thousand taken as slaves, and the population of Judea was about 4 million. And that was the Bar Kokhba revolt around Jerusalem. And these are the remains, what was found. And I was in Israel when Yigal Yadin found the letters, but this was an entrance to the excavated cave used by Bar Kokhba rebels. And these are the letters which we could read in Old Hebrew, discovered by Israeli archaeologist Yigal Yadin in 1960. And I climbed with him to see that. And the revolt was started because the Romans built this Arch of Hadrian because of defeating of the Jewish revolt. Zach, I am not finished. If there are questions, I will take questions. If not, I will continue for 10 minutes. What is your desire?
Well, if it's only 10 more minutes, why don't we, unless there's urgent questions or clarifications, why don't you go ahead and finish up and then we'll entertain questions at the end.
All right, all right. Well, we have time till 8:30, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And if there's,
Roman Empire. Roman authorities could not understand Christianity. I'm sure, everybody is sure about that. They did not understand it better than Judaism. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Any suspected Christian was punished with death, no judgment, death. Jews who became Christian ran from Judea north to the Antioch in Syria and then to Cappadocia, which I will describe. This is Cappadocia, the center of Asia Minor, Turkey today, almost deserted at that time, volcanic rock, very soft, containing zeolite that is very soft. It's not very dense, there's not stones. And the wind carved this mountainscape. But you see the openings here. For millennia, people were running there for a place to live. This is Cappadocia. These are pictures taken by me a few years ago. You see steps and entrances. Now they have motels. There is a town, Derinkuyu, in Cappadocia, 2 towns. There are 6 to 7 galleries underground with habitations, with motels, with restaurants, and this is on the surface. Very easy to carve. And the evangelist necessarily took the body place there. They went to it because there was no other adobe for them. They would have been killed by the Romans without question. And they were Matthew, former tax collector, author of the first gospel, Mark, follower of Peter, apostolic man, second gospel, Luke, friend of Paul, a doctor, third gospel, John, the youngest disciple of Jesus, author of the fourth gospel. The writing of the gospel was a fantastic opera, was a fantastic work done over 300 years by people who definitely loved what they were doing. They were written in Greek. The Gospel of Mark probably dates from around 66, 70 CE, was not written by Mark. He was no longer alive. The same for the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, written around 85 or 90 CE, and the Gospel of John, the last one, around 100. You realize there were 2 or 3 or 4 generations from the Jesus time to the time the Gospels were written. All 4 are anonymous. They are ascribed to Mark, Matthew. When they say the Gospel of Mark, correctly is Gospel according to Mark, because he was the initiator. None were written by the eyewitnesses. Very important, very important. And data about gospel from what I study are oral traditions, a lot, written collections of miracle stories, parables, sayings, traditions, written proto-gospels, very primitive, and gospel formed by combining all of them together. And I found this very interesting. The most original is that of Mark, 76%, with 18% taken from Matthew and only 3% from Luke. But this is the most original. Luke and Matthew are about the same, about half from our original, respectively, Matthew or Luke, but 1/4 in each one of them comes from other original Luke or original Matthew. And I made a mistake. Half of them is from Mark. So that is the way they were written. Now, what about the Gospels and the Evangelists? A lot has been said about anti-Semitism and the Gospels. Why did the Evangelists, who were Jews, express anti-Jewish feelings? Well, the Jews could not accept God with a physical appearance. Well, that's it. The Jews were sincerely unable to see the Messiah in Jesus. Okay? The Jews did not accept proselytism. This too, even today. Another chapter. The Gospels were written according to the author's capacity of narration, understanding, or recollection. The evangelists experienced furious, desperate pain and desolation as they perceived, look at that, Jews not accepting Jesus' teachings and role in their beliefs. Well, I said, why? Did they realize that a new religion came forth? I'm very sure they did not. That's a terrible lack of understanding in human history. Was it passive vengeance? You will see in a moment why I mentioned that. But also fear of Roman persecutions? That is very likely. This is not so simple. It is not, to me, an intentional effect of the gospel on the Jews. It so happened, so it was at that time. Look what British New Testament scholars said. James Dunn is very well known. I think he's Protestant. He argues that the various New Testament expressions of anger and hurt by a minority, puzzled by the refusal of a majority to accept the claims about Jesus the Jew. They reflect the inner tensions between Jewish communities, not yet unified by rabbinical Judaism, and the Christianity not yet detached from Judaism. These people were Jews that were no longer Jewish. I cannot put it better. Other scholars said mutual slandering, calling them names, was very much used in various sects at the time. Probably today. Then Roy Eckert, a pioneer in the field of Jewish-Christian relations, asserted the foundation of anti-Semitism and the responsibility for the Holocaust lies ultimately in the New Testament. That is terrible. That is terrible. But this is the answer. Did they generate anti-Semitism? And the same Duns argued that the New Testament contributed towards subsequent anti-Semitism in the Christian community. Now, all these, the words of the past versus the words of this is in the 21st century. I will pass on that. I will leave it with you. I will continue with our story and will try to understand what the gospel did or did not do to the Jews. In proto-Christianity, everything was just fine. Was the Judaism made in with another mantle? Christians came to Cappadocia in the 3rd century, became a center of education. They were an ideal place for safeguard from pressures and to spread the Christian doctrine. And they suffered. And they suffered. You know very well. The Romans killed them. They were for early Christian sects. I think the most closer to us is the Proto-Orthodox of Jesus Christ, being both God and man, but only one person. But it means I don't discuss the feelings of other people. There were other periods, other philosophies. Had a major impact on people coming to refuge in the Cappadocia. a lot of churches and chapels. If you go to visit Cappadocia today, they say there are about 300 small chapels like this in Göreme, called Karanlık Kilise. Kilise in Turkish means church. Fresco of Chris Pantocrator on the ceiling. Or this one, beautifully painted, very primitive. Elmalı Kilise in Göreme. Many chapels. This is, in fact, I remind you, St. Paul going from Antioch to Asia Minor, he arrives in Ephesus. And Ephesus had a very nice colony of proto-Christian. St. John died there and he's buried in Ephesus. And in Ephesus was apparently Jesus, the Virgin Mary lived. And I'm telling you what I know, that the sister Anne-Catherine Emmering, an Augustine nun, living in Germany in the 18th century, had a vision of a house in which Virgin Mary lived near Ephesus. This lady never went to Ephesus. She had a vision of this house, which in fact is there. This little house. And this is the interior of the house of the Virgin Mary. And the Vatican recognized this place as a pilgrimage site. It is seen by thousands of people every day. Now, it's now 2 minutes past half. I will continue this little chapter next week about the Jews in exile. It's a good place to stop right now. And we'll talk about the Jews in exile. In Hebrew, exile is gola, which became perverted in the word galuth. You probably know that word. Any questions? I'll be very happy to answer. Let's unmute. Can we unmute everybody?
Yeah, you are free to unmute and ask questions.
No questions? You know what a lecturer feels when there are no questions. Feels that everything was so crystal clear that everybody agrees. I cannot unmute, I don't know how to do that.
It was crystal clear. The lecturer was right.
Pardon?
They have to unmute themselves. Sean.
I actually did have a question. You mentioned John. Now, I guess there were two Johns because one of them had their head handed to them on a plate. No?
The young John.
What? Sorry?
The young John. The young one.
And what about Paul in this story?
I don't know. I don't know. You were asking about the other John? No.
It was the Baptist was the one that Salome had beheaded. And there was a different John you mentioned another John in here somewhere.
Gospel
Right
of
there.
John? Yeah, this is the youngest John.
But that's the John the Baptist.
Yes,
Okay.
right. Yes. No, the box. Lots
But
to
this-
absorb. Yeah, there are lots to absorb. I agree. I agree.
Does how does Paul figure into this?
I beg your pardon?
Paul, he's not,
Paul was not an apostle.
Ah.
Saint Paul was not an apostle. It was in the 3rd century, my dear. He was
okay.
not a contemporary of Jesus.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. All right. If I have no further questions, I don't want to miss anybody. Would you help, Zach?
It looks, there are no questions at the moment.
We have to unmute them.
The people can unmute. You are welcome to unmute yourselves. You're not, the mute is not locked. Actually, it just looks like there are no questions at the moment.
Then the next lecture would be decided the date by you, Zach, or your committee, or it's not a good time because we have the 5 o'clock.
Well, it's not every day at 5. Next week it's gonna be at the 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
My wife tells me that the second presentation from the January 6th committee will be Thursday.
Okay, we can talk. I'll talk with Dana next week, and we can see if we can reschedule. The second lecture is currently scheduled for a week from tonight at 7 o'clock. But if there's a conflict with it was the January 6th hearings, I guess, we'll see if we can reschedule, and Dana will
All right.
we'll coordinate that.
So we'll hear, Albert will send to the registrants a notification, correct?
You'll find the exact time, Sean, of the committee.
Not Thursday.
I'm not sure. I have to check it.